This is Princess Jordan here. Like my mom's Queens of Queens page.
Bringing you joy to your day, and I hope that you here to stay. But if you not, I hope you get to where you going safe. Them bad feelings I will erase. If you let my vibe take its place, how could you tell me you not into this? It's written on your face. I know me and you can relate. This the way I communicate. If nothing else, you gon' love the way I motivate. This piece is for your mind. Nowadays I know that it's hard to find. If you've been feeling like you've been rushing, just take your time. Stop and smell the roses, cause really nobody knows when God is gon' give his tokens. Just know them doors is closing, but while them doors is open, we gon' put this love in motion. Can you hear the commotion? We do our own promotion, living our life behind the mic, and this won't end tonight.
Hey everyone,
before we get
it's
back
Queens
on the
of Queens
road.
Radio here. I am Queen Myesha, the host of Queens of Queens Radio, and also we have the other host,
Queen Shavaka.
Hey Queen Shavaka.
Hey Queen Myesha.
Hey, so tonight we are doing a book reading, and the book reading that we're doing is called Stolen Legacy by Gregory James. So we have some people that are joining us tonight, Queen Shavaka. Why don't you guys introduce yourself, readers?
I'm King Aijalon, with Lawyer of Kimathi. We've been looking forward to this reading tonight. Monday night is going to be the reading. Wednesday is going to be the discussion. We'll be doing it every Monday and until we get the book done. Everyone, we're asking those who have the book, who don't have it, the PDF of the book, or to purchase the book is good for your library. Also, we want you to like, subscribe, and comment, and share. We really need the people's support. We're doing this for our people. We're running a literacy campaign, and a lot of us profess to know something, so we need to be on the same page. Starting in the same book will help us get on the same page. It's a middle page. King Aijalon, reading tonight.
Okay, well, this is Dr. Syn-Q, and I'm happy to be here tonight. I'm looking forward to reading this book. And so I guess we'll just go right ahead and get started.
And I am Dedan Kimathi. It's nice to be on the panel once again. I appreciate everybody.
Absolutely.
Stolen Legacy. Greek philosophy is stolen Egyptian philosophy by George G.M. James, Ph.D., University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff. This work was originally published in New York by Philosophical Library in 1954. The content herein has been slightly edited to mark word correction and in its organization to assist readability. The author, George Granville Mona James, was born in Georgetown, Guyana, South America. His parents were Reverend Lynch B. and Margaret E. James. George studied at Durham University in Britain, and after a period at the University of London, he earned his doctorate at Columbia University in New York, New York. He then qualified to teach mathematics, Latin, and Greek. Later, he was professor of logic and Greek at Livingston College in Salisbury, North Carolina, for 2 years before teaching at the University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff. The author has also written the following pamphlet: Health Week in Newcastle, Intermarriage, published in London, England, Black People Under Germany, published in New York, The Need of a New Education for the Subject Peoples of the World, published in Arkansas, United States, The Probable Causes of Religious Apathy in Our Institutions of Higher Learning, and the Proposal of a New Naturalism, published in Arkansas, USA. And second, he has also authored the following articles titled The Church and the New Mentality, Religion is an Inductive and Progressive Science, The Anti-Classical Ways, The First Step in Negro Reconstruction, Know Thyself, which is a series of 12 articles published in the New York Age and Zion Quarterly. The Influence of Mathematics Upon the Mentality and Character of Students, published in the Georgia Herald. The content: introduction, characteristics of Greek philosophy, the aims of the book. Part 1, Chapter 1, Greek philosophy is stolen Egyptian philosophy. The teachings of the Egyptian mysteries reached other lands centuries before it reached Athens. The authorship of the individual doctrines is extremely doubtful. The chronology of Greek philosophers is mere speculation. The compilation of the history of Greek philosophy was the plan of Aristotle executed by his school. Chapter 2, so-called Greek philosophy was alien to the Greeks and their conditions of life. The period of Greek philosophy, which is 640 to 322 BC, was a period of internal and external wars and was unsuitable for producing philosophers. Chapter 3, Greek philosophy was the offspring of the Egyptian mystery system. The Egyptian theory of salvation became the purpose of Greek philosophy. Circumstances of identity between the Egyptian and Greek systems are shown. The abolition of Greek philosophy with the Egyptian mysteries identifies them. How the African continent gave its culture to the Western world. Chapter 4, the Egyptians educated the Greeks. The effects of the Persian conquest. The effects of the conquest of Egypt by Alexander the Great. The Egyptians were the first to civilize the Greeks. Alexander visits the oracle of Ammon in the oasis of Siwa. Chapter 5, the pre-Socratic philosophers and the teachings ascribed to them. The earlier Ionian philosophers and their doctrines. Pythagoras and his doctrine. The Eleatic philosophers and their doctrine. The later Ionian philosophers and their doctrine. Summary of conclusions concerning the pre-Socratic philosophers and the history of the four qualities and four elements. The doctrines of the early Ionic, the Eclectic and later Ionic philosophers, and Pythagoras are traced to their Egyptian origin. The doctrine of the four qualities and four elements is traced to its Egyptian origin. Plagiarism, shown to be a common practice among the Greek philosophers who borrowed from one another, but chiefly from Pythagoras, who obtained his ideas from the Egyptians. The doctrine of the atom by Democritus is traced to its Egyptian origin, as well as his large number of books. He taught nothing new. Chapter 6, the Athenian philosophers. Socrates, his life, date, and place of birth, his economic status and personality, his trial and death, Crito's attempt to smuggle him out of prison. Phaedo describes the final scene before his death. Doctrine, the doctrines of the nous, the supreme good, opposites in harmony, the immortality of the soul, and self-knowledge. Summary of conclusion. The doctrines of Socrates are traced to their Egyptian origin, as he taught nothing new. The importance of the farewell conversation of Socrates with his pupils and friends is set forth. Plato, his early life, his travels in academy, his disputed writings, his doctrine. The theory of ideas, its application to natural phenomena, including the real and unreal, the nous and the creation. The ethical doctrines concerning the highest good, definition of virtue, and the cardinal virtues. The doctrine of the ideal state. Attributes are compared with the attributes of the soul and justice. Summary of conclusions. The doctrines of Plato are traced to their Egyptian origin, as he taught nothing new. Magic is shown to be the key to the interpretation of ancient religion and philosophy. I just want to laugh every time I see this, taught nothing new. It's funny. The authorship of his book is disputed by modern scholars, and ancient historians deny his authorship of the Republic and Timaeus. The allegory of the charioteer and winged Eve is traced to its Egyptian origin. Aristotle, his early life and training, his own list of books, other list of books, doctrines, summary of conclusions. The doctrines are traced to their Egyptian origin as he taught nothing new. The Library of Alexandria was the true source of Aristotle's large numbers of books. The lack of uniformity between the list of books points to doubtful authorship. The discrepancies and doubts in this life. Chapter 7. The curriculum of the Egyptian mystery system. The education of Egyptian priests according to their orders. The education of the Egyptian priests in the 7 liberal arts, secret systems of languages, and mathematical symbolism, magic. A comparison of the curriculum of the Egyptian mystery system with the list of books said to be drawn up by Aristotle himself. Chapter 8. The Memphite theology is the basis of all important doctrines of Greek philosophy. The history, description, and complete text of the Memphite theology are given, and the subject matter is divided into 3 parts. The list of the first part is followed by the philosophy which the first part teaches. The text of the second part is followed by the philosophy which the second part teaches. The text of the third part is followed by the philosophy which the third part teaches. And Memphite theology is shown to be the source of modern scientific knowledge. The identity of the creation of the Ennead with the nebular hypothesis, and the identity of the sun god Atum with the Atum of science. The Memphite theology opens great possibilities for modern scientific research. The Greek concept of the atom is shown to be erroneous. With the new interpretation of the atom, the Memphite theology provides a vast field of scientific secrets yet to be discovered. Part 2, Chapter 9. Social Reformation through the new philosophy of African redemption. Social Reformation. The knowledge that the African continent gave civilization to arts and sciences, religion, and philosophy is destined to produce a change in the mentality both of the white and black people. There are 3 persons in the drama Greek philosophy: Alexander the Great, Aristotle's school, and the ancient Roman government, who are responsible for a false tradition about Africa and the social plight of its people. Both the white and black people are common victims of a false tradition about Africa, and this fact makes both races partners in the solution of the problem of racial reformation. The methods suggested for racial reformation: re-education of both groups by worldwide dissemination of Africa's contribution to civilization, the abandonment of the false worship of Greek intellect. Special attention must be given to the re-education of missionaries and a constant demand made for a change in missionary policy. The new philosophy of African redemption. A statement and explanation of the new philosophy of African redemption are made. Black people must cultivate methods of counteraction against the false worship of Greek intellect, missionary literature and exhibition, and must demand a change in missionary policy.
This is King Aijalon. I will be starting with the introduction. Introduction. Characteristics of Greek philosophy. The term Greek philosophy to begin with is a misnomer, but there is no such philosophy in existence. The ancient Egyptians had developed a very complex religious system called the mystery, which was also the first system of salvation. As such, it is regarded the human body as a prison house of the soul, which could be literally liberated from its bodily impediments through the disciplines of the arts and sciences, and advance from the level of a mortal to that of a god. This was the notion of the Samabama, of the greatest good, to which all men must aspire, and it also became the basis of all ethical concepts. The Egyptian mystery system was also a secret order. and membership was gained by initiation and a pledge to secrecy. The teaching was graded and delivered orally to the life, and under this circumstance of secrecy. The Egyptians developed secret systems of writing and teaching and forbid their initiates from writing what they had learned. After nearly 5,000 years of prohibition against the Greeks, they were permitted to enter Egypt for the purpose of their education. First through the Persian invasion and secondly through the invasion of Alexander the Great. From the 6th century BC, therefore, to the death of Aristotle, 322 BC, the Greeks made the best of their chance to learn all they could about Egyptian culture. Most students received instruction directly from the Egyptian priest, but after the invasion of Alexander, after the invasion by Alexander the Great, I have a problem saying great, the royal temples and libraries were plundered and pillaged, and Aristotle's school converted the library at Alexandria into a research center. There is no wonder then that the production of an unusually large number of books ascribed to Aristotle had proved a physical impossibility for any single man within a lifetime. The history of Aristotle's life has done far more harm than good, since it carefully avoids any statements relating to his visits to Egypt, either on his own account or in company with Alexander the Great. When he invaded Egypt, the science of history at once throws doubt upon the life and achievements of Aristotle. He is said to have spent 20 years under the tutorship of Plato, who is regarded as a philosopher, yet he graduated as the greatest of scientists of antiquity. Two questions might be asked. A, how could Plato teach Aristotle what himself did not know? And B, why should Aristotle spend 20 years under a teacher from whom he could not learn nothing? This bit of history sounds incredible. Again, in order to avoid suspicion on the extraordinary number of books ascribed to Aristotle, history tells us that Alexander the Great gave him a large sum of money to get the books. Here again, the history sounds incredible. And three statements must here be made. A, in order to purchase books on science, they must have been in circulation as to enable Aristotle to secure them. B, if the books were in circulation because Aristotle purchased them, and since he is not supposed to have visited Egypt at all, then the books in question must have been circulated among the Greek philosophers. C, if circulated among Greek philosophers, then we would expect that the subject matter of such a book to have been known before Aristotle's time, and consequently he could have not credited either with producing them or introducing new ideas of science. Another point of considerable interest to be accounted for was the attitude of the Athenians government towards the so-called Greek philosophy, which it regarded as a foreign in origin and treated it accordingly. Only a belief study of history is necessary to show that Greek philosophy was undesirable citizens who throughout the period of their investigation were victims of relentless persecution at the hands of the Athenian government. Pythagoras was imprisoned and exiled, and Socrates was executed. Plato was sold into slavery, and Aristotle was indicted and exiled. While the earliest of only a brief study of history is necessary to show that Greek philosophy was undesirable citizens who throughout the period of their investigation were victims of relentless persecution at the hands of the Athenian government. And Pythagoras was imprisoned and exiled. Socrates was executed. Plato was sold into slavery, and Aristotle was indicted and executed. While the earliest of all of them, Pythagoras, was expelled from Croton in Italy, Can we imagine the Greeks making such an about turn as to claim the very teaching which they had at first persecuted and openly rejected? Certainly, they knew they were observing what they had never produced. And as we enter step by step into our study, the greater we discover evidence which leads us to the conclusion that Greek philosophers were not the authors of Greek philosophy, but the Egyptian Greeks, the Hierophants. Aristotle died in 322 BC, not many years after he had been aided by Alexander the Great to secure large quantities of scientific books from the royal libraries and temples of Egypt. In spite, however, of such great intellectual treasure, the death of Aristotle marked the death of philosophy among the Greeks, who did not seem to possess the natural abilities to advance these sciences. Consequently, history informs us that the Greeks were forced to make a study of ethics, which they also borrowed from the Egyptians, Sama Bama, or greatest good. The two other Athenian philosophers must be mentioned here. I mean Socrates and Plato, who also became famous in history as philosopher and great thinker. Every schoolboy believes that when he hears or reads the command, know thyself, he is hearing or reading the words which were uttered by Socrates. But the truth is that the Egyptian temples carry inscriptions on the outside addressed to Megaliths, and among them was the injunction, know thyself. Socrates copied these words from the Egyptian temple and was not the author. All mystery temples inside and out of the Egyptian carried such inscription, just like the weekly bulletins of modern churches. Similarly, every schoolboy believes that when he hears or reads the names of the four cardinal virtues, he is hearing or reading names of virtues determined by Plato. Nothing has been more misleading, for the Egyptian mysteries contained 10 virtues, and from this source Plato copied would have been called the four cardinal virtues: justice, wisdom, temperance, and courage. It is indeed surprising how for centuries the Greeks have been praised by the Western world for intellectual accomplishments which belong without a doubt to the Egyptians or the people of Africa, the people of North Africa. Another notable characteristic of Greek philosophy is the fact that most of the Greek philosophers use the teaching of Pythagoras as their model, and consequently they have introduced nothing new in the field of philosophy. Included in the Pythagorean system, we find the doctrines of A, opposites, B, harmony, C, fire, D, mind. Since it's composed of fire atoms, E, immortality, expressed as transmutations of the soul. F, the sum of Babel, the purpose of philosophy. And these, of course, are reflected in the system of hermeneutics. Parmenides, Demetrius, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. The next thing that is particular about Greek philosophy is its use in literature. The Egyptian literary system was the first order of history, and the publication of its teaching was strictly prohibited. This explains why Anicians, like Socrates, did not commit to writing their philosophy, and why the Babylonian and Chaldeans were very close associated with them, also refrained from publishing those teachings. We can at once see how easy it was for an ambitious and even hideous nation to claim a body of unreading knowledge which would make them great in the eyes of primitive world. The absurdity, however, is easily recognized when we remember that the Greek language was used to translate several systems of teachings which the Greeks could not succeed in claiming. Such were the translation of the Hebrew scriptures into Greek, so-called the Septuagint, and the translation of the Christian Gospels, Acts, and the epistles in Greek, still called the Greek New Testament. It is only the unwritten philosophy of the Egyptians translated into Greek that has met with such an unhappy fate, a legacy stolen by the Greeks. On account of reasons already given, I have been compelled to handle the subject matter of this book in the way it has been handled, namely A, with a frequency of repetition, because it is the method of the Greek philosopher to use a common principle to explain several different doctrines, and B, the quotation and analysis of doctrines, because it is the object of this book to establish the Egyptian origin, and this cannot be so satisfactorily done if the doctrines are not presented. Greek philosophy is somewhat of a drama, whose chief actors were Alexander the Great, Aristotle, and his successor in the Cupiditated school in the Roman Emperor Justinian. Alexander invaded Egypt and captured the royal library at Alexandria and plundered. Aristotle made a library of his own with plundered books, and while his school occupied the buildings and used it as a research center, finally, Justinian, the Roman emperor, established the temples and schools of philosophy. Another name for the Egyptian mystery, which the Greeks claimed as their product, on account of which they have been falsely praised and honored for centuries by the world as its greatest philosophers and thinkers. The contribution to civilization was really and truly made by the Egyptians in the African continent, but not by the Greeks or the European continent. We sometimes wonder why the people of African descent find themselves in such a social plight as they do. But the answer is plain enough. Had it not been for the drama of the Greek philosophy and its actor, the African continent would have had a different reputation, which would have enjoyed a status of respect among the nations of the world. This unfortunate position of the African continent and its people appears to be the result of misinterpretation upon which the structure of race prejudice has been built, i.e., the historical world opinion that the African continent is backward, that its people are backwards, and that their civilization is backward. Finally, the dishonesty in the movement of the publication of a Greek philosophy becomes very glaring when we refer to the fact, purposely, that by calling the theorem of the square on the hypotenuse in the Pythagorean theorem, it has concealed the truth for centuries from the world, who ought to know that the Egyptians taught Pythagoras and the Greeks what mathematics they knew. I want to mention here that among the many books which I found helpful in my present work are The Intellectual Adventure of Man and The Egyptian Religion by Professor Henry Frankfurt and The Mediterranean World in Ancient Time by Professor Eva Sanford. The aim of the book is to establish better race relations in the world by revealing a fundamental truth concerning the contribution of the African continent to civilizations. It must be borne in mind that the first lesson in humanities is to make a people aware of their contribution to civilization. And the second lesson is to teach them about their civilization. By this dissemination of truth about the civilizations of individual people, a better understanding among them and a proper appraisal of each should follow. This notion is based upon the notion of the great master mind. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Consequently, this book is an attempt to show that the true authors of Greek philosophy were not the Greek, but the people of Africa, the people of North Africa, commonly called the Egyptian. And the praise and honor falsely given to the Greeks for centuries belong to the people of Africa, the people of North Africa, and therefore to the African continent. Consequently, this theft of the African legacy by the Greeks led to the erroneous world opinion that the African continent has made no contribution to civilization, and that its people are naturally backwards. This is the misrepresentation that has become the basis of race prejudice, which has affected all people of color. For centuries, the world has been misled about the original source of the arts and sciences. For centuries, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle have been falsely idolized as models of intellectual greatness. And for centuries, the African continent has been called the Dark Continent because Europe coveted the history of transmitting to the world the arts and science. I am happy to be able to bring this information to the attention of the world so that On the one hand, all races and creeds might know the truth and free themselves from the prejudice which has corrupted human relationships. And on the other hand, that the people of the African origin might emancipate from their serfdom of inferiority complex and enter upon a new era of freedom in which they will feel like free men with full human rights and privileges. Part 1, Chapter 1, Greek philosophy and stolen Egyptian philosophy. 1. The teaching of Egyptian mysteries reached out other lands many centuries before it reached Athens. According to history, Pythagoras, after receiving a training in Egypt, returned to his native island, Samos, where he established his order for a short time, after which he migrated to Croton, a closer from the country. After which he migrated to Croton, 540 BC, in southern Italy, where his order grew to enormous proportions until finally his explosion from the country. We are also told that Thales, 16 BC, who had also received his education in Egypt, and his associates Anaximander and Anaximenes were niches of Iona in Asia Minor, which was a stronghold of the Egyptian mystery school, which they carried on Stanford, the Military World, page 195 to 205. Similarly, we are told that Exonophanes, 576 BC, Priminos, Zeno, Vinicius were also members of Iona, and they migrated to Ea in Italy and established themselves and spread the teachings of the mysteries. In like manner, we are informed that Herodotus, 530 BC, Empedocles and Anagorus and Democritus were also native of Iona and who were interested in physics. Hence, in tracing the course of the so-called Greek philosophy, we find that Ionian students, after obtaining their education from the Greek Queenz, returned to their native land, while some of them migrated to different parts of Italy where they established themselves. Consequently, history makes it clear that the surrounding neighbors of Egypt had all become familiar with the teaching of the Egyptian mystery many centuries before the Athenians, with whom in 399 BC sentenced Socrates to death, and subsequently Plato and Aijalon to flee for their lives from Athens, because philosophy was something foreign and unknown to them. For this same reason, we would expect either the Ionians or the Italians to exert their prior claim to philosophy, since it made contact with them long before it did with the Athenians, who were always his greatest enemies, until Alexander's conquest of Egypt, which provided for Aristotle free access to the library of Alexandria. The Ionians and the Italians made no attempt to claim the authorship of philosophy, because they were well aware that the Egyptian was the true author. On the other hand, after the death of Aristotle, his Athenian pupils, without the authority of the state, undertook to compile a history of philosophy, recognized at the time as the Sophia, or wisdom of the Egyptian, which had become current and traditional in the ancient world, which contemplation because it was produced by pupils who had belonged to Aristotle's school. Later, history has erroneously called Greek philosophy, in spite of the fact that the Greeks were its greatest enemy and persecuted and had persistently treated as a foreign innovation.
For this reason, the so-called Greek philosophy is stolen Egyptian philosophy, which first spread to Ionia thence to Italy, and thence to Athens. And it must be remembered that at this remote period of Greek history, i.e., to Aristotle, 640 BC through 322 BC, the Ionians were not Greek citizens, but at first Egyptian subjects and later Persian subjects. Zeller's History of Philosophy, P 37, 46, 58, 68, 83, 113, 127, 170172. Williams Turner's History of Philosophy, page 34, 39, 45, 53. Rogers' Student History of Philosophy, page 15. B.D. Alexander's History of Philosophy, page 13, 21. Sanford's The Mediterranean World, page 157, 195 through 205. A brief sketch of the ancient Egyptian empire would also make it clear that Asia Minor, or Ionia, was the ancient land of the Hittites, who were not known by any other name in ancient days. According to Diodorus and Manetho, high priests in Egypt, 2 columns were found at Niza, Arabia. One of the goddess Isis, and the other of the god Osiris, on the later of which the god declared that he had led an army into India. To the sources of the Dunabe, and as far as the ocean. This means, of course, that the Egyptian empire at a very clear date included not only the islands of the Aegean Sea and Ionian, but also extended to the extremities of the east. We are also informed that the Senusert during the 12th dynasty, i.e. about 1900 BC, conquered the whole sea coast of India beyond the Ganges to the Eastern Ocean. He is also said to have included the Cyclades and a great part of Europe in his conquest. Secondly, the Amarna letters found in the government offers of the Egyptian king Akhenaten testifies to the fact that the Egyptian empire had extended to Western Asia, Syria, and Palestine, and that for centuries Egyptian power had been supreme in the ancient world. This was the 18th dynasty, i.e. about 1500 BC. We are also told that during the reign of Thutmose III, the dominion of Egypt extended not only along the coast of Palestine, but also from Nubia to northern Asia. Breadstead's Conquest of Civilization, part of page 84, Diodorus 128, Manetho, Strabo, Dicarchus, John Kendrick's Ancient Egypt, Volume 1. The authorship of his individual doctrines is extremely doubtful. As one attempts to read this history of Greek philosophy, one discovers a complete absence of essential information concerning the early life and training of the so-called Greek philosophers. From Thales to Aristotle, no written or historian professes to know anything about their early education, and they tell us about them consists of a doubtful date and a place of birth, and B, their doctrines. But the world is left to wonder why there were and from what source they got their early education, and would naturally expect that the men who rose to the position of a teacher among relatives, friends, and associates would be well known, not only by them, but by the whole community. On the contrary, men who might well be placed among the earliest teachers in history who had grown up from childhood to manhood and had taught pupils and represented as unknown, being without any domestic, social, or early educational traces. Excuse me. This is unbelievable, and yet is a fact that the history of Greek philosophy has presented to the world a number of men whose lives it knows little or nothing about, but expects the world to accept them as the true authors of the doctrines which are alleged to be theirs. In the absence of essential evidence, the world hesitates to recognize them as such, because the truth of the whole matter of the Greek philosophy points to a very different direction. The book on nature, entitled Periphysios, was the common name under the Greek students interested in nature study wrote. The earliest copy is said to date back to the 6th century BC, and it is customary to refer to the remnants of Periphysios as the fragments. Williams Turner, History of Philosophy, page 62. We do not believe that genuine initiates produced a book on nature, since this was contrary to the rules of Egyptian mysteries. In connection with which the philosophical schools conducted their work. Egypt was the center of the body of ancient wisdom and knowledge, religious, philosophical, and scientific, spread to other lands throughout student initiates. Such teachings remained for generations and centuries in the form of tradition until the conquest of Egypt by Alexander the Great and the movement of Aristotle in his school to compile Egyptian teachings and claim it as Greek philosophy, Ancient Mysteries by C.H. Bell, P16. Consequently, as a source of authority of authorship, Periphysios is of little value, if any, since history mentions only 4 names as authors of it, namely Anaximander, Heraclitus, Parmenides, Anaxagoras, and asked the world to accept their authorship of philosophy because Theophrastus, Sextus, Proclus, and Simplicus of the school of Alexandria are said to have preserved small remnants of the fragments. If Periphysios is the criteria to the authorship of Greek philosophy, then it falls short of the purpose by a long way, since only 4 philosophers alleged to have written this book and to have remnants of their work. You have to edit this again. Greek words are no joke. Okay? According to this idea, and all the other philosophers who failed to write Periphysios to have remnants of it also failed to write Greek philosophy. This is the reductio ab absurdum to which Periphysios leads us. The schools of philosophy, Chaldean, Greek, and Persian, were part of the ancient mystery system of Egypt. They were conducted in secrecy according to the demands of the Osirica, whose teaching became common to all the schools. In keeping with demands for secrecy, the writing of publication of teachings were strictly forbidden, and consequently, initiates who had developed satisfactory in their training and had been advanced to the rank of master or teacher refrained from publishing the teachings of the mysteries of philosophy. Consequently, any publications of philosophy could not have come from the pen of the original philosophers themselves, but either from their close friends who knew their views, as in the case of Pythagoras and Socrates, or form interested persons who made a record of those philosophical teachings that had become popular opinion and tradition. There is no wonder then that in the absence of original authorship, history has had to resort to the strategy of accepting Aristotle's opinion as the sole authority in determining the authorship of Greek philosophy. Introduction to Alfred Weber's History of Philosophy. It is for these reasons that the great doubt surrounding the so-called Greek authorship of philosophy. Williams Turner, History of Philosophy, page 35, 39, 47, 53, 62, 79, 210, 211, 627, Ancient Mysteries by C.H. Bow, p. 16, Theophrastus, Fragment 2, Apud Dios, Introduction to Alfred Weber's History of Philosophy. The chronology of Greek philosophers is mere speculation. History knows nothing about the early life and training of the Greek philosophers, and this is true not only of the pre-Socratic philosophers, but also of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, who appear in history about the age of 18 and begin to teach at 40. As a body of men, they were undesirable to the state, personae non gratae, and were consequently persecuted and driven into hiding and secrecy. Under such circumstances, they kept no records of their activities, and this was done in order to conceal their identity. After the conquest of Egypt by Alexander the Great and the seizure and looting of the royal libraries at Alexandria, Aristotle's plan to usurp Egyptian philosophy was subsequently carried out by members of his school. Theophrastus, Andronicus of Rhodes, and Eudemus, who soon found themselves confronted with the problems of chronology for a history of philosophy. Introduction of Zealot's History of Philosophy, page 13. Throughout this effort, there has been much speculation concerning the date of the philosophers, whom the public knew very little about. As early as 3rd century BC, 274, 194 BC, Eratosthenes, a Stoic, drew up a chronology of Greek philosophers, and in the 2nd century BC, 140, Apollodorus also drew up another. The effort continued, and in the 1st century BC, 60 through 70 BC, Andronicus, the 11th head of the Peripatetic school, also drew up another. This difficulty continued throughout the early centuries and has come down to the present time, for it appears that all modern writers of Greek philosophy are unable to agree on the date that should be assigned to the nativity of the philosophers. The only exception appeared to occur with reference to the 3 Athenian philosophers, i.e., Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, the date of whom nativity is believed to be certain, and concerning which there is general agreement amongst historians. However, when we come to deal with the pre-Socratic philosophers, we are confronted with the confusion of uncertainty, and a few examples will serve to illustrate the untrustworthy nature of the chronology of Greek philosophers. Diogenes Laertius places the birth of Thales at 640 BC, while Williams Turner History of Philosophy places it at 620 BC. That of Frank Philly at 624 BC. That of A.K. Rogers at early in the 6th century BC, and that of W.G. Tinman at 600 BC. Diogenes Laertius places the birth of Anaximenes at 546 BC, while W. Windelbrand places it at the 6th century BC, that of Frank Philly at 588 BC, that of B.D. Alexander at 560 BC, while that of A.K. Rogers at the 6th century BC. Parmenides is credited by Diogenes as being born at 500 BC, while Fuller, Philly, and Rogers omit a date of birth because they say it is unknown. Zeller places the birth of Exthanus at 576 BC, while Diogenes gives 570 BC, and the majority of other historians declare that the date of birth is unknown. With references to Zeno, Diogenes, who does not know the date of his birth, says that he flourished between BC 464-460, while Williams Turner places it at 490 BC, like Frank Philly and B.D. Alexander, while Fuller, A.K. Rogers, and W.G. Tinman declared it is unknown. With references to Heraclitus, Zeller makes the following suppositions. If he died in 475 BC, and it was 60 years old when he died, then he must have been born in 535 BC. Similarly, Diogenes supposed that he flourished between BC 504 through 500. And while William Turner places his birth at 530 BC, Windelbrand places it at 536 BC, and Fuller and Tinman declare that he flourished in 500 BC. With references to Pythagoras, Zeller, who does not know the date of his birth, supposes that it occurred between the years 580 through 570 BC. And while Diogenes also supposed that it occurred between the year of 582 through 500 BC, William Turner, Fuller, Rogers, and Tinman declare that it is unknown. With references to Empedocles, while Diogenes places his birth at 484 BC, Turner, Windelbrand, Fuller, BC, Alexander, and Tinman place it at 490 BC, while A.K. Rogers and others declare it is unknown. With reference to Anaxagoras, while Zeller and Diogenes place his birth at 500 BC, William Turner, A.G. Fuller, and Frank Philly agree with them, while Alexander places it at 450 BC, and A.K. Rogers and others declare it is unknown. With reference to Leucippus, all historians seem to be on the opinion that he has never existed. Socrates, 469 through 399 BC. Plato, 427 through 347 BC. And Aristotle, 384 through 322 BC, are the only three philosophers that dates of whom nativity and death do not seem to have led to speculation among historians. But the reason for this uniformity is probably clue to the fact that they were Athenians and had been indicted by the Athenian government, who would naturally have investigated them and kept a record of their cases. A.K. Rogers History of Philosophy, page 104. It must be noted from the preceding comparative studies of a chronological of Greek philosophers that A, the variation in dates point to speculation. B, that the pre-Socratic philosophers were unknown because they were foreigners to the Athenian government and probably never existed. It follows that both the pre-Socratic philosophers, together with Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, were persecuted by the Athenian government for introducing foreign doctrines into Athens. In consequence of these facts, any subsequent claim by the Greek to the authorship of the same doctrines which they had rejected and persecuted must be regarded as a usurpation. The compilation of the history of Greek philosophy was a plan of Aristotle executed by his school. When Aristotle decided to compile a history of Greek philosophy, he must have made known his wishes to his pupils, Theophratus and Eudemus, for no sooner did he produce his metaphysics than Theophratus followed him by publishing 18 books on the doctrines of the physicists. Similarly, after Theophratus had published his doctrines of the physics, Eudemus produced separate histories of arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and also theology. This was an amazing start because of the large number of scientific books and the wide range of subjects treated. This situation has rightly aroused the suspicion of the world, and it questions the source of these scientific works.
Since Theophratus and Eudemus were students under Aristotle at the same time, since the conquest of Egypt by Alexander the Great made the Egyptian library at Alexandria available to the Greeks for research, then it must be expected that the three men, Aristotle, who was a close friend of Alexander, Theophratus, and Eudemus, not only did research at the Alexandrine library at the same time, but must also have helped themselves to books, which enabled them to follow each other so closely in the production of scientific works. William Turner's History of Philosophy, pages 158 and 159, which were either a portion of the war booty taken from the library or compilations from them. Note that Aristotle's works reveal the signs of note-taking and that Theophratus and Eudemus were pupils attending Aristotle's school at the same time. William Turner's History of Philosophy, page 127. Just here, it might be as well to mention the names of Aristotle's pupils who took an active part in promoting the movement towards the compilation of a history of Greek philosophy. A. Theophratus of Lesbos, 371 to 286 BC, who succeeded Aristotle as head of the Peripatetics school. As elsewhere mentioned, he is said to have produced 18 books on the doctrines of physicists. Who were these physicists? Greek or Egyptian? Just think of it. B. Eudemus of Rhodes, a contemporary of Theophratus, with whom he also attended Aristotle's school. He is said to have produced histories of arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and theology, as elsewhere mentioned. What was the source of the data of the histories of these sciences, which must have taken any nation thousands of years to develop? Greece or Egypt? Just think of it. C. Andronicus of Rhodes, an eclectic of Aristotle's school, and editor of his works, 70 BC. These men's works, together with Aristotle's Metaphysics, which contains a critical summary of the doctrines of all preceding philosophers, seem to form the nucleus of a compilation of what has been called the history of Greek philosophy. Zeller's History of Greek Philosophy, Introduction, pages 7-14. The next movement was the organization of an association called the Learned Study of Aristotle's Writings, whose members were Theophrastus and Andronicus, who were both closely connected with the school of Aristotle. The function of this association was to identify the literature and doctrines of philosophy with their so-called respective authors, and in order to accomplish this, the alumni of Aristotle's school and its friends were encouraged to enter upon a research for Aristotle's work and to write commentaries on it. In addition to this, the Learned Association also encouraged research for the recovery of what has been named fragments or remnants of a book, which is supposed to have once existed and to have borne the common title Periphysios, i.e. concerning nature. Here again, those who went out in search of Periphysios or its remnants were the alumni of Aristotle's school and its friends, but their efforts to establish authorship was a failure. A. Theophrastus found only 2 lines of Periphysios supposed to have been written by Anaximander. B. Sextus and Proclus of the 5th century AD and Simplicius of the 6th century AD are said to have found a copy of Periphysios supposed to have been produced by Parmenides. C. In addition, the name of Simplicius is also associated with the copy of Periphysios, which is supposed to have been produced by Anaxagoras. So much for Periphysios and the fragments, and so much for the attempt of the Learned Association for the study of Aristotle's works, which has failed because of the lack of evidence, as has elsewhere been pointed out. The recovery of 2 copies and 2 lines of Periphysios is not proof that all Greek philosophers wrote Periphysios, or even that the names assigned to them were their bona fide authors. It certainly would appear that the object of the Learned Association was to beat Aristotle's own drum and dance. It was Aristotle's idea to compile a history of philosophy, and it was Aristotle's school and its alumni that carried out the idea, we are told. Chapter 2. So-called Greek philosophy was alien to the Greeks in their conditions of life. Number 1, the period of Greek philosophy, 640 to 322 BC, was a period of internal and external wars and was therefore unsuitable for producing philosophers. History supports the fact that from the time of Thales to the time of Aristotle, the Greeks were victims of internal disunion on the one hand, while on the other, they lived in constant fear of invasion from the Persians, who were a common enemy to the city-state. Consequently, when they were not fighting with one another, they found themselves busy fighting the Persians, who soon dominated them and became their masters. From the 6th century BC, the territory from the coast of Asia Minor to the Indus Valley became united under the single power of Persia, whose central territory, Iran, has survived as a national unit to the present day. Persian expansion was like a nightmare to the Greeks, who dreaded the Persians on account of their invulnerable navy and organized themselves into leagues and confederacies in order to resist their enemies. See 12, page 195. Stanford's Mediterranean world. Okay. There are 3 sources which throw light on the chaotic and troublesome conditions of this period in Greek history. A. the Persian conquest. After the Persians had conquered the Ionians, possibly ancient Hittites, and made them their subjects, Polycrates, 539-524 BC, seized the island of Samos and made it a famous city. Sanford's Mediterranean World, I guess chapter 9, between 499 and 494 BC, the Ionians revolted against the Persians, who defeated them at last, while Cyprus and Miletus were also captured. Sanford's Mediterranean World, chapter 12. In the summer of 490 BC, Greek and Persian forces met at Marathon, but also a hand-to-hand combat. But after a hand-to-hand fight, both belligerents withdrew, only to prepare stronger forces in order to renew the conflict. Accordingly, after 10 years had elapsed, a Hellenic League was organized against the Persians, and the Spartan king Leonidas was sent. Spartan king Leonidas. This is Sparta. That's that dude. The Spartan king Leonidas was sent with an army to hold the pass at Thermopylae until the fleet should win a decisive victory. Chapter 12, pages 202, Sanford's Mediterranean World. Accordingly, during the month of August, 481 BC, Persian ships under the command of Xerxes anchored in the Gulf of Pagasae, while the Greeks anchored off Cape Artemisia. Both sides awaited a favorable opportunity to attack. The Persians began to force the pass, while simultaneously one of their detachments was secretly aided by a Greek trader along a steep mountain pass to the rear of the Greek position. I'm just watching 300 as I read this. Having been taken by surprise, the Greek guards immediately withdrew without resistance. The Spartans, who were guarding Thermopylae, were all slain and the pass captured by the Persians. Sanford's Mediterranean World, chapter 12, page 202. Having been defeated at Thermopylae, the Greeks withdrew to Salamis, where again they encountered a naval engagement with the Persians. It was late in September 481 BC, and the result was a wanton destruction of ships on both sides without any decision. Both belligerents withdrew, the Persians to Thessaly and the Greeks to Attica. Sanford's Mediterranean World, chapter 12, page 203. With the persistent aim of freedom from Persian domination, Athens, together with the island and coast cities of the Aegean and Ionia, renewed their resistance to Persian rule. This was the Confederacy of Delos, which undertook several naval engagements but with little or no success. In 467 BC, the Battle of Eurymedon River was fought and lost with a great number of ships. 18 years later, 449 BC, another naval engagement took place off the island of Cyprus, but again without decision, and consequently Persian sovereignty over the Greeks remained. Sanford's Mediterranean World, chapter 12, page 205. In the meantime, Sparta, under the terms of the Treaty of Miletus, which is 413 BC, obtained subsidies from Persia for naval construction on condition that she recognized Persian sovereignty over the Ionians and their allies. This was done by Sparta as a threat to Athenian ambition. However, it was not long after the Treaty of Miletus that the Greeks themselves submitted to the authority and dominance of the Persians. During the winter 387 to 386 BC, the individual Ionian cities signed the peace terms of the Persian king and finally accepted Persian rule. This treaty was negotiated by a Spartan envoy who was authorized by the Persian king to enforce its provisions. Sanford's Mediterranean World, chapter 13 and 15, pages 225 and 255. B. The League. Apart from the resistance of the common foe, the Persians, a study of the function of the League, reveals the enmity and spirit of aggression which were characteristic of the relationship which existed between the Greek city-states themselves. Accordingly, in 505 BC, the Peloponnesian states signed treaties among themselves, pledging warfare against Sparta, who had absorbed them under her influence. Meanwhile, Aristogoras revived the Ionian League, 499-494 BC, to resist Persian aggression, and friendship between Athens and Aegina was restored by the Hellenic League, 481 BC, which was afterward converted into the Confederacy of Delos, 478 BC, as mentioned elsewhere. In like manner, Thebes also fell in line with the general temper of the age and organized the Ionian League, a federation of city-states for self-protection and aggression. Stanford's Mediterranean World, Chapter 9, pages 150, Chapter 12, page 201. In 377 BC, a second Athenian confederacy was organized, but this was to frustrate the aims of the Lacedaemonians and to compel them to respect the right of the Athenians and their allies. Stanford's Mediterranean World, Chapter 15, page 260. Likewise, in 290 BC, the Aijalon League, made up of the states of central Greece, gained control of Delphi and frequently violated Achaean rights in the Peloponnesus. Wow. In 225 BC, antagonist Doson organized another Hellenic League with the purpose of obstructing the ambitions of Sparta and her Attonian allies. Stanford's Mediterranean World, Chapter 18, page 317 and 319. W.H. Couch's History of Greece, pages 206 to 209. Chapter 11. Oxford and Robinson's Hellenic History, pages 115 to 121, pages 127 to 142. T.B. Bury's History of Greece, pages 216 to 229, 240 to 241, 259 to 269, 471, 472, and the Tutorial History of Greece by W.J. Woodhouse, Chapter 18, Chapter 20, and Chapter 21. C. The Peloponnesian Wars, 640 to 445 BC, and 431, 421 BC. Owing to the ambitions of Athens to dominate the Ionian and other neighboring peoples, Pericles launched a campaign of alliances and conquests extending from Thessaly to Argos and from Euboea to New Pactus, Achaea, and the chief islands of the Ionian Sea. The net results were as follows. A. Athens established alliances with Boeotia, Phocis, and Leucris in spite of Sparta's opposition. B. In 456 BC, Aegina was captured and made tributary. C. In 450 BC, Athens failed in her attempt to invade Corinth. D. In 451, friendship between Athens and Sparta was restored through the instrumentality of Cimon, on the condition that Athenian alliance with Argos was dissolved. E. In 447 BC, the exiled oligarchs of Thebes defeated the Athenians at Corinthia and reestablished the Boeotian League under Theban leadership. F. In 445 BC, the 30 Years' Peace was signed, and after the revolt of Euboea and Megara, Sparta invaded Attica, and Pericles sued for peace. Athens lost all her continental holdings. Stanford's Mediterranean World, Chapter 13, page 220. The Second Peloponnesian War, 431-421 BC, like that of the first, arose through a general spirit of rebellion among the Greek city-states against Athenian imperialism, Sparta being the chief enemy. The net results were as follows. A. In 435 BC, war between Corcyra and Corinth, Corcyra being aided by Athens. B. In 432 BC, 1. Athens blockaded Potidaea because she refused to dismantle her southern walls and dismiss her Corinthian magistrates. 2. Megara was excluded from Greek markets in order to reduce her to subjugation. 3. The Peloponnesian League planned war against Athens and Boeotia. Phocis and Leucas were to fight against Athens, Corcyra, and a few northern states. C. In 431 BC, 1. Thebes attacked Plataea, and while the Peloponnesian army occupied Attica, the Athenian fleet raided Peloponnesus. 2. Pericles, being unable to defend Attica, adequately transferred the civil population every spring to the area between the walls of Athens and the Piraeus. In the meantime, the Athenian fleet operated against Potidaea, the Peloponnesian coast, and Corinthian commerce. B. In 428 BC, Medellin and all the cities of Lesbos revolted. A brutal massacre of oligarchs took place at Corcyra. In 425 BC, a Lycaonian force at Pylos was captured, and a fort was established through Demosthenes and Cleon. Cythera and other stations were fortified against the Peloponnesians. Amphipolis was captured by Brasidas, a Spartan, who had instigated rebellion among the Athenian allies, and after Brasidas and Cleon had been killed in battle, 422 BC, Athens authorized Nicias to sue for peace. Stanford's Mediterranean World, Chapter 13, pages 220 to 21. It is obvious from a study of the causes and effects of the Peloponnesian Wars that A. the Greek states were envious of each other, and B. the desire for power and expansion led to constant aggression and warfare among themselves. Read back. B. The condition of constant warfare between the city-states was unfavorable for the production of philosophers. Before passing on to consider my next proposition, I would like to say that it is accepted truth that the development of philosophical thought requires an environment which is free from disturbance and worry. The period commonly assigned to Greek philosophy, i.e. Thales to Aristotle, was exactly the opposite to the one of peace and tranquility, and therefore it could not be expected to produce philosophy. The obstacles against the origin and development of Greek philosophy were not only the frequency of civil wars and the constant defense against Persian aggression, but also the threat of extermination from the Athenian government, its worst enemy. D. Philosophy requires a suitable environment. I must now add the following quotation which depicts this period. For although the natural ills that beset mankind are many, we ourselves have added to them by wars and civil strife against one another, so that some have been unjustly put to death in their own city, others driven into exile, while their wives and children and many have been compelled for the sake of their daily bread to die fighting against their own people for the sake of the enemy. I, Socrates, Botsford and Robinson's Hellenic History, Chapter 13, Couch's History of Greece, Chapter 22, Bury's History of Greece, Chapter 10, The Tutorial History of Greece by W.J. Woodhouse, Chapter 27, 28, and 29.
That concludes Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 of Stolen Legacy by Gregory James.